Thank you, Marianne, and yes, I guess I will start by just saying that I'm responsible, together with 3 other people, Martin Luckman, Lund Jacobsen, and Sebastian Bülow, for the anti-reenactment of Showix. And very appropriate, which is not running. Well, Showix, I should begin by explaining, perhaps briefly, was part of Osaka, of course. So they actually represented by an image very similar to this one in the report, and as such, they are of course also part of that. If you turn the box upside down, they will fall out as well. But I will not necessarily, or not at all actually, categorize them as avant-garde. It's more like, well, experimental artist, or at least artist experimenting with a lot of different things and on many different levels, even on some theoretical levels, at least in the case of Pierre Højholt, who was of the artist in Showix. So Showix was, it was 3 people. It was Pierre Højholt, the Danish, some call him a poet, I call him a media poet, and the composer, Gunnar Møller-Petersen, who was here yesterday for the opening, and who is also incidentally responsible for a number of other stuff in the archive section, and Pauli Henriksen, who is a photographer, and incidentally also the photographer of a number of things in Aarhus report as well, and a local photographer at that. So they were rummaging in Aarhus around 68, 69 until 70, 71, doing a number of what they call anti-happenings. And why did they do that? I mean, that's partly a discussion or debate, dialogue with Duchamp. Marcel Duchamp, who was, as you may know, doing anti-art. And the neo-avant-garde movement, especially in New York, was, and well, elsewhere as well, was interested in Duchamp in many different ways. And so this idea of anti-art was flying around, and they picked up on that in the very Showixian way of actually pointing towards it and emptying it at the same time. So you have a concept that you think you know from art history, art theory, philosophy even, but then you don't know it if you go closer, because there is an emptying taking place, an emptying of meanings and of relations and of concepts. And that's the whole setup of Showix. It's very ironic, but it's also satiric, and it's also very real. So it's partly this idea of building a framework for these 3 artists to operate. It's a platform for them to express themselves, but it's moreover also a philosophical discussion and debate of the role of the artist and the changing role of the artist. And this is perhaps where it becomes very little avant-gardistic, but that can be discussed. I mean, the discussion of the role of the artist, of course, is also present in the avant-garde tradition, of course, whatever that is. But I think that the discussion or the debate going on in Showix was somehow different in the sense that they included a very intense interest of the media culture into what they were doing. So technology, all kinds of new tech things at that point, at that time, into the blender of many different ways of looking at how the artistic society and culture was behaving and acting out at the moment, and trying to make their own version of that. It's really interesting to read Pierre Højholt and his thoughts. He wrote 2 books that are reflecting on this. One is called The Method of Cézanne, and the other is called The Grimaces of Nothingness. And you might see the grimaces actually on stage in the rotunda, in the slides. The artists are, as it were, trying to break through, but never actually make it as such. And so there is this dialogue as well with the notion of actually making it and breaking through as an artist in a media-controlled, over-mediated, you might say, culture. And there is the march on the spot, which you heard before, which I will end by just explaining what that is. I mean, what I did was actually to make what I call a curatorial fantasy, because I didn't want to. I find I'm uneasy with reenacting stuff. I've been that for a number of years, and so I either react to stuff or enact them by other artists, inviting them to do that. And in this case, I thought it was rather much fun to follow up on the idea of the anti-happening and do an anti-reenactment. And by doing that, of course, I'm making my own mix of what they did, but by sidestepping, so to speak, in their concept, which is in a way to rework the material the way that I think that Perovic wanted to have reworked it. And luckily, Gunnar Müller-Petersen signed off on that yesterday. So March on the Spot is really appropriate to end with, because that's in a way a metaphor for what they're doing. They're pointing the role of the artist, the processes of making art, and the processes of making art in a mediated, over-mediated, hyper-mediated society. They're turning them onto themselves and also onto the temperament of actually from the artist. See me, I want to break through. In the middle of all this, I want to have an audience. And what it all amounts to is a march on the spot. So you have this, you have that, but you also have this satire of the actual march on the spot, which is a song about going to war, leaving a very beautiful country with a beautiful countryside, going to war and shoot everybody who comes into your sight. And it's about wanting to be a very beautiful corpse. So it's a very thick satire, a lot of irony, and also somewhere political, but in a different way, I think, than maybe what we discussed. That was my rambling. Yes.
Thank you. Marianne, you present the Museum of Ørum.
Thank you. I think it's on. Put the microphone. Good. So, first of all, what is Museum of Ørum? Museum of Ørum is a self-institution. It's a fiction in many ways. It exists in the mind, and now and again we feel there might be an idea cropping up, so that might be worth exploring. In this case, we were invited to make a presentation in Systems 4. Thank you. We decided maybe I should wait. It's Morton's anti-art situation interfering here. Why is that? The Museum Order's contribution to Systemic 4 is a film program called World in Motion. Being the museum, we are clearly interested in the idea of collections and what these collections might be and what they mean. We decided to present a parallel case to the case of what appears to be largely fluxes in the case of the Aarhus report. So we put together a program of films which charts a parallel history of events that may have happened at similar and parallel at times, which are not reflected anywhere else in the show, except that I notice in the timeline there are a few references that do connect to parts of the films that we are showing here. We were also motivated by the possibility that many of the films that we chose may have been forgotten, that they are no longer remembered or seen as being of any relevance. So we thought this was an occasion to try to sort of reveal the historical memory and the process of unforgetting. In relation to the program itself, almost all of the films deal with moments of revolution and concepts of fascism, and many of them address the question of bourgeois culture. We thought this was relevant. Being in an art institution, it is relevant. And perhaps also relevant in this case is that all of the material is culled, and they come from sources which are not legal, and we have made this little leaflet where we give guidelines. Anybody who's interested in taking part in acts of piracy and downloading it for themselves. And we also point out that all of this material is readily available online and in many other places, in bits or in total, and with the comments. So we point out to where these places might be. We were also, I think, interested in not necessarily making a case for art, although I have to acknowledge that the films are good as works of art, but that just is maybe it's rather unfortunate. I don't know. This is a difficult area, but I think it is. I would prefer to my colleagues, but I think it's probably we would all agree that we were more interested in scenarios of history and culture. I think we would agree with that. course, as we are the collective, the Museum of Audio is not a self-referential discourse, so we are at great pains to point out that none of this has anything to do with us and our personal histories. So we aren't actually including ourselves in what we are doing in that sort of art way. That these are collective efforts, and we acknowledge what's been done in that. It's not anti-art, though, I have to say, and it's not a satire, or it's not even ironic. So I don't really want to go on saying a lot, because it's really a very simple idea, and as I said, it's making a small gesture towards a parallel case. I just want to finish on something. I was at Modern Art Oxford, and they have an archive, of course, they're a museum, and I asked to see their archive, and they said yes, they were very happy to show me the archive, which was a big room with lots of boxes, and on the in their bookshop they had a book, a catalogue of a show that they did in 1985, which was about Japanese avant-garde, and I said, well, do you know anything about it? They said, no, but the cover looks good, it's red, so it goes with the Stuart's show, so they just put all these red things. And so I said, can I see the archive on this show? They said, sure, and all these, I think it was about 12 boxes that came up, and it was actually interesting, and there were two interesting things about it for me. One of them was that during the reading of these documents, what has emerged was this man called Mr. Urugi, and Mr. Urugi was clearly a historian of some relevance, and there emerged these letters from the British Council in Japan, strongly objecting to his inclusion as an advisor in the show, and these letters were sort of great attacks on the uselessness of this person, and why would an institution like Modern Art Oxford want such a guy, and the concluding and the damning sentence of the British Council's letter. The only reason why I was alerted to this cache of documents was that it said strictly private, and I thought, well, that's what I should be reading here, clearly. But the point is that according to the British Council in Tokyo at the time, he said that they were blocking the inclusion of Mr. Urugi, and that there was no way the exhibition would be funded if he was included because Mr. Yorugi said that art needed to be liberated from itself. So my next project is to see who Mr. Yorugi is, you know. It is an obvious thing to do. I just want to end on the note of this little diversion. When I was looking at these documents, it became clearer to me that many of these artists who were classified as the Japanese avant-garde emerged immediately after the Second World War with a clear, visceral a connection to the atomic bombs, and many of these works relate to solarized bodies, and there's a whole chapter on a man who goes to look for his friend who appears to him as a shadow on a wall. What I would say, and then there is this sense of formlessness in all of these work. There's a sense of liquidity and nothing is solid and so on. How I want to end this is that in that very particular context of Japan and the bombs that fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and so on, I think, make a sense of what these people were doing. But it is very local, it belongs to that time and to that very moment. But in the general sense that we are discussing the avant-garde, I would agree. It's not here, and maybe it was never there. So I will be looking for Mr. Yorugi. Thank you very much.
Is this on?
Yes.
No.
Now it isn't.
Now it's on?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi. I just want to thank the Kunsthal for this seminar. It's been very interesting. All the earlier speakers brought up amazing, intricate points, which I can only hope to kind of riff on. But in the spirit of conversation, I'll try to touch on a few things and maybe bring up some things that were going through my mind. Is I'm based in Los Angeles, so the idea of kind of penetrating the Aarhus report as a historical document was very daunting and without the language skills and so on. So I kind of accepted that as a given at the get-go, that I would be coming from the outside and have a peripheral relationship to this network. And I chose to kind of amplify that by proposing a parallel site. So my work down in the basement, all these kind of sculptural, topographic items relate to a parallel site in southern Colorado, where some of these same avant-gardist ideas influenced through similar sources, John Cage, Buckminster Fuller, Rauschenberg, Alan Capro, happenings and environments. The kind of an important center for that at a pedagogical level was a place in rural North Carolina called Black Mountain College, which you may know from art history. Very important, but that is kind of dropped out of the New York loop. There were young artists on the American scene in the hinterlands out west who were also influenced by some of the same figures that were influencing the debate here in Aarhus, apparently, at least from the American side, who decided to build their own kind of version of culture, and that became Drop City, an immersive kind of art into life experiment. And we know it in our kind of art history now as this iconic hippie compound with geodesic domes, or, you know, it looks like a moonscape. It was the time of the space race. It partook in all those tropes of the new frontier, the pioneer, and also the primal, the native. And going back, and so I'm kind of picking up this idea of the tabula rasa as a driving image in our reception of the avant-garde, but also kind of asking a counter question, which is what happens when you take those ideas out to the countryside? And I think the unstated ground of the conversation so far has been twofold. One, the idea of the historical as opposed to the spatial. And the spatial going unexamined as meaning the city, the context of the city. And I think to begin to think about the 40 years that have passed, which we really have to start to investigate geography and start to think about the privatization of the public realm in the city. As a horizon on political activity, it's not the same place. Meanwhile, you know, with the rise of the virtual economy and virtual trade and the virtualization of global relationships, Mr. Perovic here, you know, this sort of what happens to space and how does that change what an avant-garde could be? Does globalization only add to the sense of failure? Because now we're not just changing our neighborhood, we have to change the world. We have to change a global supply chain. We have to change unequal north-south. It's become such a debilitating kind of problem, challenge. So anyway, that sort of preamble. I'll be quick, but I just thought I'd just show you really quickly where Drop City happened. My project is really about if the iconography of Drop City abstracts it and treats it as happening on a tabula rasa. My kind of study question for this project was really what was actually there? What was the material, geological, hydrological, economic context of this experiment? And as a way of pushing back on the idea of tabula rasa as a kind of a normative horizon for even receiving that project. So I think rather than speak abstractly, although we're going to be looking at the abstraction of Google Maps, I'll just point out a few features that have kind of emerged in my, here, there's Drop City Liquor. That's a new one for me. I didn't know that was on the map. And it's important to say that Drop City is named, I mean, I think now we think drop out, we think drop acid, but it's actually named for a specific art form called drop-ins that were developed by these artists from the University of Kansas, where they would drop rocks off the roofs of buildings to inspire these sort of fluxus experiences in passers-by. And they would paint the rocks bright colors, and they did other things. They put like a plate of breakfast on the sidewalk and waited to see what would happen. But they were just micro interventions, again, in the urban scene of Lawrence, Kansas. Anyway, Drop City is located up here in the historical town of Elmora, which is not even really on the map anymore. Here, what's interesting, you know, we think of the tabula rasa with that kind of whole idea of the utopic, and I'm going to mess up because it's a Danish keyboard. I may do this wrong. Sorry if there's a lot of noise in the image here. But how do I actually find the toolbar and zoom in? Oh, sorry. Now you see, I'm a technological basket case. I just want to be able to zoom in and out. And get rid of, oh, it's over there. It's just hidden from here. Sorry. Okay. Thanks. So this little white dot, I think, is where we're going. but, I want to go out first. This, you can see the terrain here. This river drainage was a very important part of the Santa Fe Trail, which was a critical part of Western expansion. This would have been a major migration route in the development of the continental tabula rasa of the United States. Because you can see it's dry country. There's not a lot of water, so people follow the water. That in turn brought about rail lines and transit routes. So, this idea is of kind of starting with human migrations based on a natural landscape is I think an important counterweight to the idea of operating in a purely historical space, because it brings other things that kind of relativize the modernist project in this area in particular. But anyway, this north-south line to the left here are the Rocky Mountains. So you've got the spine of the American continent stopping the western progress. You can see it's very dry, you go a long way. When you get to the Rockies, there's a lot of mining extractive industries here. We're right on the border with New Mexico. This was the basis of the economy, and at the time the Armory show was going on in New York City, there's major miner strikes at coal mines right here, right above, sorry, I keep going back and forth. Right above Rock City, right here, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Right here is the site of the bloodiest labor dispute in U.S. history, where the military was called out to mow down miners, women, children, families, just to settle the dispute. John D. Rockefeller's railroads. So this is the Pan American Highway. It was to be a major rail route linking the continents north-south. That company lost out. The east-western one. So Drop City is actually exactly at the crosshairs of the economic expansion of the U.S. And the Americans by another way of framing the problem. So it's by far out in the middle of nowhere. It's actually exactly at some kind of geographic economic center. Sorry, I'm going to make you busy. Let's just go in a little further. So you've got historical ways of migration. This river is named the Purgatoire. It was named by French trappers, but it's land that was occupied by the Spanish conquistadors. South of, like the name Trinidad is a Spanish name. You go more than about 100 miles north and it's all Anglo-based. So you've got the native culture, the French, the Spanish. This has been contested terrain its entire occupied history, and of course the Native American underneath. So anyway, I guess I'm just sort of kind of in a quick way riffing on some things that are all around the edges of Drop City. If you come in at a closer scale, this white building is right across the road. This was the historical town of El Moro. There's really nothing left there except that school, and right here is the site of Drop City. Sorry, I gave it away. That white building is not a barn, that was a school. It's a public school that was built after the Dust Bowl. All that dry area that you saw was actually failed farmland. So the failed mining economies, failed agricultural economies, that failed company towns. But all this area with these, it's now a failed truck stop. You can see the metal roof of this metal building, the new international architecture, has been caved in by snow and wind. So everything on this site, you imagine here the hippies right here having a counterculture experiment in the shadow of a US-funded, government-funded, beautiful sandstone building. So even the idea of pedagogical institutional culture was right at their literal doorstep, yet we completely write that out of the history. I mean, so anyway, I'll just stop here with sort of some of these questions about what happens with some of these avant-gardist ideas when the horizon of political action is moved out to the countryside, where, which may I think happen sooner in the U.S., this interiority in the back to the land movement. Again, it's really a set of questions about what was around that and how by revisualizing relationships in the material landscape and the economic landscape can we get to a new ground of thinking about this legacy. Like, where would you take those ideas if you understood space and place in a concrete way rather than in an abstract way? And just to speak very much in passing about the formal language of the project downstairs, the Drop City folks were very interested in kind of signifying the universe, through this dome, the idea of the dome of the head, the dome of the heavens, the universal, platonic purity of the geodesic, and that being kind of a political psychic space. But it was all based on triangles, which is now the basis of Google Maps, and kind of military use of the landscape and so on, which mapping essentially is a military-derived modeling device. I guess I'm trying to inhabit that space and thinking about how can we model these spaces imaginatively through form, through narrative, through diagrammatic sorts of things. So that's kind of where my own aesthetic relationship to that language of constructivist form comes through that idea of modeling space and language, of course, as another modeling system. Those things competing with each other. So anyway, I'll just leave it there with maybe some questions. Thanks.
Okay. Can you hear me? I am Leah Posa, and I was also part of the group that started everything, and very early on we discussed all this thing about the archive actually, which was, and I just knew from the beginning that I was not going to do a new archive because there's other people that can do that. So yeah, I should also say that it has been extremely interesting today. I just really felt that I wanted to say so many things, but I'm actually quite sick, so my brain is not working very well. So then it's anyway, I think maybe my way of going into this project was I think for me there was definitely something nostalgic about going back to old support and this avant-garde thing, but so it was kind of a problem, but I also love problems, so it was kind of staying with the trouble, as I'm also writing in the film, which is actually Donna Harrow is saying that. So yeah, I think what I'm interested with or around in avant-garde is maybe the doing and the actions, that they actually wanted something else, and I feel that sometimes there is a tendency today that we do all these archives and it seems like we like the image of the radical, but we don't want to actually change, or we don't want to live differently, or we don't want to be dirty, or we don't want to go somewhere else. So for me it was then some kind of opportunity to maybe get a little dirty and also go into maybe make a failure or maybe make a bad work or whatever, but at least to try to do something and to work with this kind of idea of this local, super local, whatever. So that was why I decided to do this experiment at the Sønderholm, which is this kind of farm that Mathias Kokholm is having. And since Mathias Kokholm is the connection I have to Aarhus, or I've had for a long time, it was also a nice way to, because otherwise I don't know Aarhus, but I know this farm. So we could go out there and we could do things, and it was also a way to then maybe work with this, trying to make this avant-garde, which is sometimes a little, it's all connected with these strong figures, like the sun and all that, and to get it down to earth and really work with the soil and with all the dirty stuff and with the people and with the... Yeah, so it was at least some kind of test for me, and I mean, I'm not going to explain exactly what that ended up, or you can go and watch, but I tried to mix also very bad French, and also there's also references to bataille, because I thought, okay, bataille is interesting also because we have Mikkel Bolt, who is maybe the avant-garde person in Denmark, and he's having this fetish about bataille, and of course I also love bataille, but what is interesting about bataille is also maybe this action, and they went out to the forest, and they had these, there was a lot of body in it as well, and I think sometimes we forget about the body and about the stupid and the dirt and kind of the mud, that we're creatures of the mud, and we need to somehow maybe put a little more focus on that, so we are not only playing artists that are then reorganizing things that were already dirty, but we don't want to be dirty ourselves, we don't want to risk. And how can you risk?
Because now we are sort of getting things and getting sort of real material to actually some of the theoretical discussions into what has been made for this exhibition. Which I think that would be really interesting to do that. But now time has, really progressed really late. I think perhaps if not someone is sort of really, really eager, burning, throwing themselves onto the microphone and saying, I want to state something, I want to ask a question, then we should say thank you so much for this last part of the seminar. I think that was really, it was not answering questions, it was opening up. And yes, the point of the visit is sort of worth taking with us into this post-history thing. So I think also we will be sending the audience perhaps home for today, but then back into the exhibition another day to reinvestigate your investigations of what the report sort of set off. So thank you very much.